The maid, with calloused hands and quiet grace, never imagined the life she had always dreamed of would come to her so unexpectedly. After 8 long years of silence, the billionaire, her employer, would finally break his silence, not with a contract, but with a confession that would change everything. Alana had always been the quiet one, standing in the background of grandiose rooms that smelled of polished mahogany and fresh roses. As the maid at the Montgomery estate, she was invisible. Her days were spent cleaning, cooking, and ensuring that everything was just so for the powerful, wealthy family that lived within these walls. To them, she was just another servant, a faceless presence that moved in and out of rooms without so much as a glance. But to her, this house held more than just memories of chores and duties. It was a reminder of everything she didn't have. And no matter how hard she tried to bury it, one truth persisted. She had always loved Bennett Montgomery. Bennett was the youngest son of the Montgomery family, a billionaire who inherited his father's empire at the age of 25. Tall, handsome, and exuding an air of arrogance, he was everything she wasn't. Alana, with her humble roots and quiet demeanor, stood in stark contrast to the life Bennett led. He was used to luxury, while she was used to serving it. He had everything, and she had nothing but a heart that secretly longed for the impossible, a future with him. Despite their differences in status, Alana's affection for Bennett had been unspoken but deep, woven into the fabric of her daily life. She caught glimpses of him in passing, when he walked past her with his expensive cologne, his business partners always trailing behind. Sometimes their eyes would meet for just a second, and in that fleeting moment, Alana felt something shift inside her. But that was all it ever was. A fleeting moment, a dream that was never meant to come true. The world had set its place for them, and she had long accepted that she would always be the maid, and he would always be the man who would never notice her. But little did she know things were about to change in a way she never expected. One crisp autumn evening, just as the last light of day bled into the evening sky, Alana noticed something unusual. It was the way Bennett had looked at her. It wasn't the usual glance of indifference or the passing acknowledgement when he asked her to refill his glass. No, this was different. His eyes held something deeper. She had noticed it earlier when she went to his office to clean, and he was standing by the window, staring out at the sprawling estate below. He'd barely acknowledged her presence as she entered, which, at first, was typical. Bennett rarely interacted with anyone outside of his immediate circle of business partners or close friends. But that day, as she dusted the bookshelves, she could feel his gaze on her. It wasn't a stare, per se, but the subtle shift in his posture, his body leaning slightly forward, eyes not fully leaving her as she moved about the room. There was a quiet tension in the air, an electric hum that seemed to vibrate through the space. Alana had tried to dismiss it, attributing the moment to her own longing. Perhaps she was reading into things. It wasn't the first time she had imagined an affection that wasn't there, but this felt different. The subtlety was unmistakable. She couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, as she lay in her modest room at the back of the house, the same thoughts circled in her mind. Was it possible that after all these years, Bennett Montgomery, the man she had silently loved from afar, had finally noticed her? But why would he? They were worlds apart. He had everything at his disposal, while she had only her quiet existence, her loyalty to her work, and a heart full of unspoken love. The next day, Alana's routine was disrupted. Bennett called for her, his voice coming through the intercom, a rare occurrence in itself. "Alana, I need you to bring me the documents from my study," he said, his tone crisp and authoritative. A routine request, nothing out of the ordinary, but it was the way he said it. There was an edge to his voice, a softness she hadn't heard before. When she entered the study, Bennett was sitting behind his large mahogany desk, papers scattered across it. He didn't look up at first, absorbed in his thoughts, but the air in the room felt charged, as though something was brewing just beneath the surface. Alana stood at the doorway, hesitating. She had no reason to be nervous. This was just another task, another day, but the intensity in the air made her second-guess herself. He glanced up then, and their eyes met. The look was unmistakable. There was an unfamiliar vulnerability in his gaze, one that she had never seen before. It was as if in that moment he was no longer the powerful businessman or the son of the Montgomery Empire. He was just a man who had to confront something. Alana felt the weight of it, though she couldn't yet understand what it meant. The silence hung between them for what seemed like an eternity. "Alana," he finally said, his voice lower than usual, "sit down, we need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the pulse of hope, real hope, that something was about to change. But what did it mean? What did he want to talk about? The mystery of his words weighed heavily on her as she sat down across from him, unsure of what was coming next. And as much as she wanted to brace herself for anything, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something that would alter the course of both their lives forever. The next few days were an uncomfortable blur of anticipation and uncertainty. Every time Alana walked through the halls of the Montgomery estate, she felt Bennett's eyes on her, and each time her heart would race. But they never spoke again in the same way they had that day in the study. The moments of connection were brief, fleeting, glances that lingered a little too long, gestures that felt uncharacteristically kind. And with each interaction, the line between their professional relationship and something else seemed to blur, stretching thin under the weight of her longing. But Alana was careful. She couldn't allow herself to hope. She couldn't afford the fantasy of what might be, not when she was so keenly aware of the boundaries between them. She was the maid. He was the heir to a fortune, a man whose life was filled with people who matched his world, not someone like her. Her place had always been here in the shadows, maintaining the perfection of their lives from behind the scenes. To step out of that role, however tempting, felt like a betrayal of the life she had carefully constructed for herself. She couldn't afford to lose that. Then came the evening that would change everything. It began like any other evening, with Alana preparing the family's dinner in the kitchen. The house was quiet, the usual hum of business talk and family gossip absent for the night. As she set the table, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The sharpness of the tension that had been building between her and Bennett was too much to ignore. She was just about to serve the dinner when the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hall, signaling that Bennett was approaching. His voice, calm but firm, came from behind her. "Alana, can you join me in the garden for a moment? I need to speak with you." Her breath caught in her throat, but she nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She quickly followed him outside, where the cool evening air brushed against her skin and the garden lights created soft shadows around them. Bennett led her to a secluded corner of the garden, near the fountain, where the sound of water trickling created a peaceful ambiance. His usual confident demeanor seemed to have softened tonight. He turned to face her, his hands resting on the stone edge of the fountain, and for a moment there was a vulnerability in his expression that she hadn't seen before. "Alana," he began, his voice low, "I've been thinking about something for a long time. I don't know how to say it, but I need you to know that I've always respected you, more than you realize." Alana's pulse quickened, but she tried to keep her expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Bennett took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "You're not just the maid, Alana. You never were. I've seen you all these years, how you care for this house, for everyone in it. You've given everything without asking for anything in return." He paused, swallowing hard. "And I find myself thinking about you, more than I should." The words hung in the air like an unsaid confession, and for a moment Alana was sure she had imagined it all. Was this a joke? Was he playing with her emotions, toying with the feelings she had kept hidden for so long? But the sincerity in his eyes told her that it wasn't. There was something real there, something she had never expected. She stepped back, trying to collect herself. "Bennett, I know," he cut her off gently. "I know this is complicated, but I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't feel something. I've been avoiding it for so long, telling myself it's impossible, but I can't anymore." The truth in his voice made her heart ache. But at the same time, doubt and fear crept in. She had always known their worlds were separate, and crossing that line would change everything. Could she really risk everything she had built for the chance at something with him? Bennett, we come from different worlds. I'm just the maid. You have your future, your family, your responsibilities. I don't care about that, he said firmly. I care about you. I've always cared about you. Alana stood there, rooted to the spot, caught between the overwhelming urge to run and the equally strong desire to stay. Every part of her screamed that this wasn't the way it was supposed to happen, but her heart refused to let go of the hope Bennett had stirred within her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder, was it possible? Could this impossible love, this long-forgotten dream, actually become a reality? But even as hope began to blossom, the enormity of the situation loomed over her. There were so many obstacles, so many challenges ahead. This could never be easy. She wasn't sure she was ready for the consequences, but she couldn't deny the pull toward him. This was only the beginning, and the tension between them would only grow stronger. As Bennett took a step closer, his hand reaching for hers, Alana knew that the decision she made tonight would change everything, for better or worse. The days that followed that night felt like an endless loop of conflicting emotions, a series of moments that blurred the line between what was real and what was merely a fleeting fantasy. Alana's heart raced every time she saw Bennett, but so did her mind. The weight of his confession hung over her like a shadow, an invisible force that both comforted and terrified her. For the first time in 8 years, she was faced with the possibility of something real, something tangible between them. But the more she allowed herself to think about it, the more the doubts crept in. The Montgomery estate, once a sanctuary where she found solace in her routine, suddenly felt like a prison. Every corner of the house now reminded her of her place in the world, or more accurately, her lack of place. She couldn't help but wonder if Bennett had truly seen her, or if this was just a passing moment of weakness, an indulgence on his part that he would soon regret. She had heard rumors about his past, how he had dated women from wealthy families, women who fit perfectly into his world. None of them had been maids. And yet Bennett continued to seek her out again and again. His gestures were small, subtle, leaving a note for her in the kitchen, asking her to join him for a walk around the grounds, making an effort to spend time with her outside of his usual demands. There was an intimacy in his actions that was hard to ignore, and it left Alana feeling both alive and vulnerable. She found herself craving his presence, the warmth of his touch, even the gentleness in his voice when he called her name. It was a dangerous game, one that she didn't know how to play. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Bennett asked her to meet him by the fountain again. Her stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and dread. She had avoided him for the past few days, unsure of what to say or how to act. But the moment she stepped into the garden and saw him standing there, waiting for her, something shifted inside her. There was no turning back now. "Alana," Bennett said softly, his voice full of emotion, "I've thought about what we talked about. I know this is complicated, and I know what you're probably thinking, but I can't stop thinking about you. I need to be with you. I want you to be a part of my life." Alana felt her breath catch in her throat. His words, so direct, so raw, left her speechless. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, to make this moment feel less overwhelming, but she couldn't. The words were caught in her throat, tangled with fear, hope, and an unrelenting sense of uncertainty. She stepped closer, feeling the coolness of the night air against her skin. Bennett reached for her hand, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. She could hear the soft rustling of leaves in the trees, the gentle flow of water from the fountain, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. It was just them, standing in the quiet garden, their hearts beating in sync. But then the silence broke. "Do you love me, Alana?" Bennett asked, his voice trembling with the weight of the question. The words hit her like a bolt of lightning, and she was torn between the overwhelming truth of her feelings and the reality of the situation. She had loved him for so long, but the idea of speaking it out loud felt impossible. Would her love for him be enough to bridge the chasm between their worlds? Could love alone overcome the barriers of class, status, and the life she had built for herself. Her heart ached with the weight of the question. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I I don't know if love is enough, Bennett. You come from a world I don't belong to. I don't know if I can ever fit into your life. You deserve someone who belongs in your world." Bennett stepped closer, his expression softening. "Alana, I don't care about that. I care about you. I've always cared about you. I want to be with you, no matter what." But Alana couldn't ignore the doubts that clouded her mind. The reality of their situation was too much to ignore. She was a maid, and he was the heir to a vast fortune. Could they really make this work? Or was this just an impossible dream that would only end in heartbreak? The pain in her chest intensified as she realized that the decision she faced was not just about love, it was about the future, about the life she had worked so hard to build. She could see the possibility of happiness with Bennett, but she also saw the risks, the sacrifices, and the inevitable judgment from the world around them. Could she truly give up everything she had known for the chance at a love that seemed destined to fail? Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at him. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, Bennett." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, wiping away the tear that had fallen. "I'm not asking you to be strong. I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that we can find a way." Alana closed her eyes, her heart breaking with the weight of the decision she had to make. But even as the doubt gnawed at her, she felt something stir deep within her, a quiet, reluctant hope. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. Could love really conquer all? For the first time in years, Alana allowed herself to believe that it might. But in the pit of her stomach, she knew the hardest part was yet to come. The days after that conversation felt like walking through a fog. Alana's thoughts were tangled, her heart a battleground between desire and fear. She couldn't stop thinking about Bennett's words, the weight of his confession, the sincerity in his eyes. But she also couldn't ignore the overwhelming pressure building in her chest, the realization that loving him meant stepping into a life she wasn't sure she was prepared for, that it meant losing her carefully constructed world, was too much to bear. She threw herself into her work, burying herself in the routines she had come to know so well. The Montgomery family was accustomed to perfection, and Alana took pride in maintaining that image. But no matter how hard she worked, her mind kept drifting back to Bennett, to him, to them, to the impossible reality of it all. Then, one evening, as the golden light of dusk filtered through the windows, Alana received a letter. It was unexpected, as letters were rarely addressed to the staff. With trembling hands, she opened it and found that it was from Bennett's mother, Evelyn Montgomery. Her signature was at the bottom of the letter, but it wasn't the signature that made Alana's stomach drop, it was the content. The letter was an invitation to the Montgomery family's upcoming gala, but not just any invitation. Evelyn had specifically requested Alana's presence, a gesture that seemed out of place considering her status as a maid. The note was cordial but firm, and it made no secret of its intention. Evelyn wanted Alana to accompany Bennett to the event. She wanted her to step into his world. The shock of it hit Alana like a wave, but as she read the letter again, her excitement mixed with dread. She had always stayed in the background, never dreaming she would be part of such an event. The thought of mingling with the wealthy elite, dressed in gowns and tuxedos, was both thrilling and terrifying. Could she truly belong in that world? Her mind raced. This was more than just a gala. This was a test of whether she could truly step into the life Bennett wanted to build with her. But it wasn't just about fitting in. It was about everything she had ever known being pulled from beneath her feet. The life she had built as a maid, the life of quiet dignity and simplicity, would be gone. She would be thrust into a world where eyes were always watching, where expectations were high, and where judgment would be sharp. But the most terrifying part was knowing that she wasn't sure she was ready to lose herself. She had always been Alana the maid, the woman who found purpose in serving others. She had always known her place. But what would she become in Bennett's world? What would happen if she didn't belong there? Later that evening, as the dinner bells rang and the house came alive with the usual chatter of servants and guests, Alana found herself standing in front of the mirror in her small room, the letter clutched tightly in her hand. She stared at her reflection, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Could she face the world Bennett was offering her? Could she dare to take that step, knowing full well the consequences? Bennett had opened a door, one she wasn't sure she could walk through. The truth was, she wasn't just afraid of the Montgomery world, she was afraid of herself. Would she lose the person she was in the process? Would she become just another trophy on his arm, another woman who had to give up her identity to fit into his? The weight of the decision was suffocating. She wanted to believe in them, in what Bennett had promised. She wanted to step into the life he offered, to experience the love he had given her. But the price seemed too high. The risk was too great. And as much as her heart wanted to say yes, her mind screamed no. What if she lost everything she had built? What if this love wasn't enough to keep them from drifting apart from the forces that would inevitably pull them in different directions? Her breath hitched in her chest as she placed the letter down on the small wooden dresser. She couldn't bring herself to open the door to the future Bennett wanted. Not yet. She had to be sure. She had to find the strength to make the right choice, no matter how painful it would be. And so she made the decision to wait. She couldn't go to the gala, not yet. Not until she was certain of what she wanted, and more importantly, certain of who she was. Until then, the tension would remain. The distance between them would grow, but it was a distance she was willing to endure if it meant finding herself in the process. Alana closed her eyes, taking in a shaky breath. She had to choose her own path before she could walk down Bennett's. The future was now uncertain, but the decision was clear. She had to let go of the fantasy and face the reality. And that, in itself, was the hardest part. The gala arrived, a shimmering event held in the grand ballroom of the Montgomery estate, with its chandeliers casting golden light over the guests dressed in their finest. Alana stood at the edge of the grand hall, feeling the weight of the decision she had made just hours before. She had told Bennett she couldn't go, that she wasn't ready to step into the world he was offering. But something had shifted inside her, something stronger than fear. Alana had always prided herself on her independence, her quiet strength. She had learned early on that love was not a luxury for people like her. It was a privilege for the wealthy, the powerful, the ones who didn't have to worry about where their next meal was coming from, or if their social standing would ever be questioned. Love, in her eyes, was always something unattainable. And yet, Bennett's words, their moments together, had awakened a part of her that longed for something more. In the silence of her room, after giving her final refusal to Bennett, Alana had looked at her reflection once again. But this time she didn't see the maid she had always been. She saw a woman who had spent years putting everyone else's needs above her own, a woman who had quietly loved from the sidelines but had never dared to step into the light. But now she realized she could. She had spent so many years holding herself back, telling herself she didn't deserve more. She had let fear and doubt be the chains that held her in place, but she no longer wanted to live in that shadow. She wanted to step into the light, to be seen, not as a maid or a servant, but as someone who was worthy of love and the life she dreamed of. She wanted to live without limits, to take a chance on the life Bennett was offering her. Without a second thought, she made the decision to join him at the gala, even if it meant stepping into a world she wasn't sure she belonged in. She changed into the dress Bennett had bought for her, a stunning midnight blue gown that made her feel like someone else, someone who wasn't confined by her past. As she looked in the mirror, she saw the transformation that had taken place inside her. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into the Montgomery estate 8 years ago. She was stronger, braver, more willing to take risks. She was ready for the next chapter, whatever it may be. When she stepped into the ballroom, the moment she entered felt like a dream. Eyes turned in her direction, but for the first time it didn't matter. She was no longer invisible. The gown she wore, the confidence she radiated, it was as if she was finally claiming the life she had long desired. She searched the room for Bennett, and when their eyes met, time seemed to slow. He was standing by the edge of the crowd, his gaze locked on her, his expression one of awe and admiration. As she walked toward him, the tension between them was palpable. It was as if the entire room disappeared, leaving only the two of them. She could see the relief in his eyes, the joy that she had come. She felt it too, a rush of emotions that flooded her heart and filled the emptiness she had carried for so long. "I knew you'd come," Bennett said softly, his voice barely audible over the music. He reached for her hand, and as his fingers closed around hers, Alana knew this was the moment of transformation. She had chosen to embrace the love, the life, and the future that Bennett had promised her. It was no longer about fitting into his world. It was about carving out a place for herself, a place where she could exist as both the woman he loved and the woman she had always wanted to be. "I had to," she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. "I had to choose this. I had to choose us." The music swelled around them as they shared their first dance, and for the first time Alana felt truly seen, truly alive. The fear, the doubt, the uncertainty, all of it faded into the background as they moved together in perfect harmony. This was her moment. And as the world watched, she knew she had found her place, not as the maid or the outsider, but as Bennett's equal, his partner, his love. In that moment, everything changed. Alana was no longer bound by the limitations of her past. She had taken control of her future, and it was a future filled with possibility, love, and the freedom to be who she was meant to be. The gala passed in a blur of laughter, music, and well wishes. Alana had never imagined herself in a world like this, yet there she was, dancing with Bennett under the opulent lights of the Montgomery Ballroom. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged, not as a servant or a shadow, but as a woman who had stepped into the light, fully embracing her own worth. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. Bennett, true to his word, introduced Alana to his world. The shift was slow but steady. He didn't hide her away or treat her like a secret. He was proud of her, proud to call her his partner. There were moments of discomfort, moments where Alana felt the weight of her past and the judgment that came from some of the people in Bennett's world. But Bennett stood by her side, his unwavering support giving her the strength to endure. In the beginning, there were awkward moments, especially with the Montgomery family. Alana had never known the dynamics of a wealthy family, the unspoken rules that came with the territory. At times, she felt out of place at social events or dinners, but Bennett made sure she never felt isolated. His quiet assurances, the way he included her in conversations, made her feel as though she was not just a part of his life, but a vital part of his world. As the weeks went by, the tension in Alana's heart began to dissolve. She was no longer the woman who had hid behind her fear and doubts. She had embraced her place beside Bennett, learning to navigate both his world and her own without losing herself in the process. Her identity was no longer tied to her job, her status, or her past. She had become a woman of her own choosing, one who was unafraid to love and be loved in return. One evening, Bennett took her hand and led her to the rooftop of his penthouse, a private moment they had shared a few times since the gala. The city lights stretched out before them, and the soft hum of the city below felt peaceful. They stood in silence for a while, simply enjoying the view. Bennett turned to her, his eyes soft with affection. "Alana, I want you to know that I don't regret anything, not a single thing. I've been waiting for this moment with you my whole life." Alana smiled, her heart full. "I've been waiting too." The truth was, she had never imagined a life like this. She had never dreamed she could break free from her past, that love could exist between them, that she could find happiness in a place she had once thought was out of reach. And yet, here she was, alive, loved, and stronger than ever. As Bennett pulled her into his arms, Alana realized that the transformation wasn't just about stepping into his world, it was about stepping into her own. She had let go of the fear and the self-doubt that had held her back for so long. She had learned to embrace love, not as something she was entitled to, but as something she had earned, as something that was rightfully hers. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one that was hers to write. And as the cool night air surrounded them, Alana knew that she had found her place, by Bennett's side, but also in her own heart, where she had always belonged.